Republicans are eyeing a potential in with black voters less than 200 days before the midterms. And Stephen A. Smith got a lot of people talking this week when he said this. Take a listen.
I wish for one election that every black person would vote Republican. Since 1964, the black folks, we have been giving our vote to the Democratic Party at an exorbitant rate. Therefore, they know they got our vote. The Republicans know they'll never get our vote, so they don't give a damn about us. And as a result, we're the only community in America devoid of representation.
Somebody very quick to respond was fellow sports journalist Jemele Hill, and here's what she had to say.
Black people aren't aligned with Democrats because we think they're so much better, or because we believe that Democrats don't mess up too, or that Democrats are without racism. The point is we strategically align ourselves where we see the pathway.
And Jemele Hill joins us now. She is a contributing writer for The Atlantic. Hey, it's great to have you on the show, Jemele. Tell us, and we heard some of your thoughts there, but tell us a little bit more in detail why you had such a huge problem with Stephen A. Smith's comments there, and just how simplistic they were.
So there was a trigger word that he used, and the trigger word was giving. Black people didn't give the Democratic Party their votes. The Democratic Party had to earn them. As you all know, the demarcation line in terms of why black people began to wholly throw their support behind the party was because of three very important bills: the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act. And when you look at the most progressive legislation that has impacted black life over the last 50, 60 years, or since that, 1964 kind of fork in the road politically, that is why. And so I guess what I rejected, and I understand that there's a general dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. I get that. And I understand why. And I know that a lot of black voters do in many ways feel taken advantage of. But what I reject is this idea that black people aren't doing this without thought or strategy. It was black people who understood Joe Biden needed to be the candidate. It is black people who have understood for I don't know how many elections you want to go, what is best for the country. And so to come at black voters like they're just simply not smart enough, or they're just giving away their vote, I just find I had an issue with that. And while Stephen A. didn't use the words, he wasn't trying to necessarily say that that black people weren't smart about voting for Democrats. That's nevertheless the way that it came off. And to me, the question he needs to pose is, why did so many white people leave the Democratic Party? Why was civil rights and the idea of equality so horrid to white voters that the majority of them have not voted for a Democratic presidential nominee since Lyndon B. Johnson? So why don't you ask them that question instead of coming at black voters and asking us about our vote? Ask them why they decided to leave the party and what they've gotten out of doing that. Because I can promise you, a lot of white working class voters, white middle class voters haven't gotten a return either. But yet this is always the question with black voters, but never with white voters who continue to vote Republican, especially in deep southern states. And we see the condition that they are in terms of economy, healthcare, education. That's never posed to them. It's only something that is burdened or assumed of black voters.
I also just want to add, to the history here. At one point, black voters did vote Republican back in the 1800s into the early 20th century, in large part because of Lincoln. And then when the Republican Party changed, they changed. So black voters are very capable of seeing the facts as they are and then realigning themselves and adjusting.
And so that was the part that I don't think Stephen A. gave proper historical context to. So what he said was entirely ahistorical. It's like black people aren't giving anybody their votes. These are votes that come with a lot of thought and strategy. And as you just said, like Jackie Robinson, one of the most celebrated Americans in history and certainly a celebrated sports figure, he was a Republican who then changed his mind because in his mind, the party changed. We all know why the party changed. It was a Southern strategy. It was Barry Goldwater. It was them deciding that they seized an opportunity to maintain deep South white votership. That's what happened. And that is why black people decided to switch over. So this idea that black people should just give Republicans their votes, because he doesn't really provide any reason why. It's just in response to, well, we're unhappy that we haven't gotten enough progress. So let's just give them their vote. Have Republicans actually earned that? Have they actually done anything at all to strategically prove that they care about black voters or the things that are important to black voters? What we see from the Republican Party now is a whole lot of alignment with white supremacy. We see what just happened with the Voting Rights Act and how that was gutted by the Supreme Court. We see how the Deep South is now moving to basically eliminate black representation from a congressional and lawmaking standpoint, and allowing majority black districts and black people who are in the South, of which is what almost 60% of black people live in the South. They're eliminating their voice. But Stephen A. Smith thinks it's a good idea to reward that party with our votes, and for what?
So, Jemele, we've been talking a lot about this binary choice about should black voters or indeed any contingent of the electorate who's unhappy with the party that they've been voting for, vote for the other party. There's a third path, too, which is just sitting it out altogether. And I'm wondering what you make of the contingent of the left that in the last presidential election sat out a large part, in certain parts of the country, sat out the vote in the 2024 election because of disagreements with the Democratic Party, and particularly with the Biden administration. I'm thinking of like the uncommitted movement that decided not to vote for Kamala Harris. Do you think that that was a viable or helpful strategy? Is there another way that you would suggest that voters who feel like they've been their views are being ignored or their votes are being taken for granted should make their wishes known?
So I think withholding your vote was a stupid strategy, and looking at the condition and shape that our country is in right now only, to me, affirms that. Sometimes, to use a sports analogy, okay, it's like if you're a team that, the whole point is to score a touchdown, but you have to obviously make first downs to get down the field. Sometimes you may come up with a really big offensive play that might get you 10 or 15 or 20 yards. But sometimes you got to be okay with getting 3 yards and then fighting for another down. And so those who are unsatisfied with the positions on Gaza, the positions with Israel, that was a time to fight for another day, because there was just too much at stake beyond that issue. And I'm not trying to minimize what that issue meant to people. Like, I understand that a lot of people, for them, the hard line was genocide, and I get that. But at the same time, I think there was real pressure that could be applied to a Biden or a Harris administration that is just off the table completely now. And I know there were some folks that were of the opinion of, like, let's burn it all down and then reconstruct. Well, no, because now you're looking at this Supreme Court and how they're moving, and in general, the way the Republican Party is moving. And this is about trying to amass power. It's about minority rule. So now you don't even get that opportunity. So you have to ask yourself, was this a worthwhile strategy? And I don't think it was. I just don't. And I know there are people who would disagree with that. But I think that there were other pathways and other pressures that could have been applied to the administration to get them to move off some of the points that they wanted to move them off of.
Jemele Hill, thanks so much for your time tonight.